these aren't the only 5 by any means, right? Happy 5 Fact Friday. 5 Fact Friday. I'm Charlie Lambden, and it is 5 Fact Friday. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the usual Friday disarray, where I am late for my live stream and completely disorganized and unprepared. But you know, I like it's comfortable when nothing changes, and it feels familiar. My total disarray feels familiar. Where has this week gone? Honestly, it just never ceases to amaze me how much faster time seems to go as we get older. And I also don't seem to have control of my speech this morning. It's 5 Fact Friday. It is the video of the week when I share with you the 5 newly reported things that I think will have the biggest impact on the housing market, perhaps straight away, perhaps not for a while, but all of them are factors that I think are relevant if you are moving house or considering moving house in the near future. And this week we have an awful lot of stuff. All of it needs a lot of in-depth coverage, which I won't have time to do today, but we'll do the best we can. And as ever, I will start with a slurp of my coffee and I will run through the headlines of the 5, in fact 6, because there's a fresh one out this morning I've discovered I'm going to share with you. The 5 facts, the 6 facts that I think are most interesting and relevant to house movers this week. If you are aware of other facts that have a bigger impact on housing market news in the last 7 days, I would like to hear about it. This is by no means, no, my power of speech is failing me. I'm just going to crack on. Right, fact number 1. The government exploits house moving pain to score popularity points and claims it knows how to fix the market, but it doesn't solve any problems. And this is their promise to use digital stuff to fix the housing market and bring transaction times down by 4 weeks. Well, when transaction times are 20 weeks, that's a pathetic target in any case. But it can't and it won't work. It's been tried before. Government intervention into the operations of private marketplaces always, without exception, backfires. And I'm absolutely gobsmacked at how many people in the industry who know that are still going, yay, government intervention, fix housing market. Anyway, that's fact number 1. Fact number 2, according to a poll of tenants carried out by yours truly on X this week, only 12% of tenants think their landlord is bad, with over 50% saying that they're actually good. That was a poll of 310 tenants, which is important context because there are terrible landlords who need eviscerating out of the marketplace using enforcement of existing regulations. So there are really, really bad landlords. But the simple, hard fact of the matter is that most tenants are perfectly happy with their landlord and the rent they're paying. A happy tenant equals a good landlord. Number 3, and this speaks to Stiggy's number 1 bugbear and gripe with housing affordability. Zoopla, Richard Donnell, put out a story this week on LinkedIn, which I've linked to in the link below, proving that easing lending criteria hurts affordability in the poorest regions first. In other words, wherever house prices are lowest, wherever first-time buying is most affordable, is where the most immediate rise in house prices is seen when lending criteria are eased. So, in other words, it's smoking gun proof that when you expand the amount of money people can borrow, it immediately pushes up house prices. Not interest rates. Interest rates don't do it as much. Not even wages move housing affordability like expanding lending. Nothing moves house prices faster or more instantly than expanding lending, right? And yet, you movers out there, I haven't seen anyone actually complaining in volume about, hang on a second, this is a terrible idea. If the government does that, it means first-time buyer prices will be pushed back up out of reach. No, you all absolutely, like hostages with Stockholm Syndrome, which is not what this title is about, it's about a different fact, just go, yay, more debt. Let's push house prices up. We don't care if we push house prices up, as long as we can afford to buy, sod everyone else. That's what you're doing when you accept it. And when you go out and take a mortgage on 6 times your income, and I get it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, if you are an individual for whom owning a house comes into reality because of extended lending. Of course you're going to do it. But the point is, as a government policy, easing lending criteria hurts affordability at the lowest price first. Let that sink in. Sorry, I'm getting too much detail here. This is supposed to be just the headlines. The RICS shows market activity remains subdued. The RICS spokesperson says the housing market continues to struggle for momentum, with seemingly no clear catalyst on the horizon to spark a turnaround over the near term. Sellers who are thinking of waiting till next year for the market to come back, listen to this. Buyer demand remains subdued while agreed sales are still on a downward trend, reflecting a broader hesitancy in the market, he says. And I say, do not wait to sell. I know lots of you are. And the only theoretical reason to wait to sell is because something has made you think that maybe the housing market will pick back up in the new year because of the Boxing Day bounce or the spring bounce, or because house prices always go up. Not this year. That will not be happening this year. If you think that, it's because you're unaware of the economic facts and realities that are dragging. I mean, just this morning, in fact, this came out too late for me to include in 5 Fact Friday, but KPMG has done another employment survey. Down. Wage growth slowing. It's all moving against you if you are a seller. And number 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes. The Tory, and this is probably the biggest piece of news this week in terms of how many column inches it got. And by the way, to Gen Zers, column inches is how we used to refer to how much media coverage something got in the press. Now it's clicks. Tories pledged to abolish stamp duty on all primary residence transactions, sparking a national debate showing how little people understand the economic dynamics of the housing market. Many people incorrectly assume that scrapping stamp duty means less money for the government. It doesn't, but it comes from multiple different sources. The replacement of it comes from multiple different sources on the back of increased moving activity. Right, we'll get back into that more. And in fact, there's another fact out this morning, the bonus one, which is that there's been a survey done on downsizers saying that if stamp duty was abolished, an additional 500,000 downsizers would sell up in the first year if stamp duty was abolished, right? That's 50% of the entire number of properties sold every year would, as an extra amount, would come to the market. This is proof of how much pent up, locked up, blocked up activity there is because of stamp duty. And over 5 years, the number increases to 2.8 million. So over 500,000 extra moves every year over the next 5 years if they abolished it. Now, you've got to remember that with every house sale, there's an extra 20 grand of money spent one-off that wouldn't be spent otherwise. Okay, so 500,000 downsizers spending 20 grand each is 10 billion, I think. Yes, 10 billion extra pounds spent a year in the economy. That's mental math, I may have got that wrong, but I think it is. And the most important thing is that that extra money all gets spent at a local level. So a lot of people are completely unaware of just how many people would move house if stamp duty was abolished. How many extra people who currently aren't moving. And people worry about, oh, but it benefits the richest the most. That's because of how much big property is locked up, not downsizing because of stamp duty. And what happens if all of that bigger property comes onto the market? Prices come down, which is probably why they're not going to do it. Good morning, everybody, by the way. Good morning. Anthony Keeley, Boss Hog 36, Paola, Andrew Taylor, Yachek D, Ramble and Root, Duffy, Az Zed, Savkin, AK, Sasha Yanshin. What time do you call this? Yes. Yes, that's right. WF451 says digital ID will usher in the SET, sex enjoyment tax. Sasha, thanks for nothing, Charlie. Now my son has to miss school because I'm too busy to take him watching your live. Well, look, stop telling me you're too busy to come and be a guest on my lives then in the evenings, and just give me some dates in the evening when you say, hey, I can come on. Would love to have you back on, Sasha. Lots to talk about. Yes, there was an issue with my thought of the day being cut off in the newsletter. Sorry about that, Tina B. Scarlet Spear, good morning. God, where are you guys? Aren't you supposed to be at work or on your way there? Mike Warwick Saunders, hi there. Right, okay, let's get into the actual facts. I told you I was disorganized. Okay, here we go. I'm not going to spend too long on these. I'm not going to ramble on them except the important ones where I probably will ramble a bit. Okay. And then we'll talk about the move of Stockholm Syndrome over stamp duty towards the end. Right. This is, and don't get me started on this, I could get really, really frustrated about this. Families to save hundreds of pounds. Like, it's almost like the government showing how little they understand the true cost and pain of home moving. Families to save hundreds of pounds in major home buying overall. Now, this is a false claim, right? They're saying it like it's a done deal, and it's so far from being a done deal. First-time buyers set to save money when buying a home and timelines reduced. This is desperate vote grabbing. And it talks about there is one measure in here which is a good one, but it doesn't need the government to make it law. And that is forcing sellers to have all the relevant information needed up front before putting their house on the market. That's what Carrington's, for example, does. And guess what? When you bring your house to the market with all the relevant information ready up front, you get a lot more buyers interested because they're like, okay, this seller's trying to make it easier. They're not trying to cover stuff up, and they're making the transaction faster. And it doesn't just take 4 weeks off the transaction. It's taken 10 weeks off the transaction. And they are now, in fact, it's more than that. They are now exchanging on almost everything in 7 to 8 weeks, partly because of this. It's not just because of that. It's because they're doing such a good job of making a really good market for each property. So, but the point is, government intervention in the property market is always bad. If anyone from government is watching this and you want to help, scrap stamp duty on primary residence transactions for UK nationals and make house price transactions transparent, please. The prices. Get HMRC to publish house price transactions that they have from just 2 weeks ago, and that would vanquish overvaluing overnight. That's what you should do. The only two things you should do, no legislation required. You could actually do those things overnight, right? Not even exaggerating. You could decide today and it could be in practice tomorrow. I mean, HMRC might not move that fast, but so that's fact number one. The government thinks it's going to fix the housing market, which is just laughable. Fact number two, and this is important. I did this survey because let me say first and foremost, there are some shocking criminal landlords out there who, if existing laws were simply enforced, would already not be landlords anymore. Okay, this is what's so frustrating. Why does the public think that more legislation fixes anything when it's clear to all of us that existing legislation isn't being used to fix existing problems? Okay, so if the government were to enforce existing rules, then the existing bad landlords would be very quickly run out of the market. That would benefit everyone faster than anything else. Instead, what they're doing is for 10 years, they've been drip feeding policies that are just squeezing landlords out. And what that's done is it's pushed up rent and it's pushed up homelessness. And the point here is that the narrative that all landlords are bad people is not true. Because there are some people who choose and want to rent. Okay? Now, has the number of landlords buying up using buy-to-let mortgages over the last 30 years made housing more affordable? Yes, it has. That's a bad thing. There's been too much lending. Again, it was the lending that caused it, right? The lending is the problem. Always in affordability, too much lending is always the problem. Okay, so that's what created too many landlords in the first place, was too much lending. So every time you hear the government say, we're going to lend more, we're going to lend more. No, that's what's got us here, is the lending. Okay, but having said that, right, so I acknowledge that problem. Too much lending and too much buy-to-let lending has created unaffordable house prices. Bad. But that doesn't mean all landlords are bad. There are landlords who don't have mortgages. They own the properties outright and they rent them out. And there are tenants who go, hey, of my own free will, I am choosing to rent a property because it suits my life right now. And it makes no sense to drive those away. Okay, so to all those of you all of those landlords among you whose tenants think you're good, you deserve more recognition. To those bad landlords among you who don't understand the ethical duties that you have, could you please sell your property to a good landlord or sell your property to the tenant and just get out? That would be much better for you to do that. Stop just thinking that it's an investment. You are in this business of providing somebody with a home, and a home is something that comes with rights. It's not an investment class. Okay, if you're adding value to your tenant's life by being a great landlord and renting them a great home at a really fair price, that means that they A, want to look after it, and B, want to stay long term, you are adding value to society. If you are a landlord who is exploiting market rents to squeeze and juice every last drop out of your tenant, you're unresponsive when they need maintenance things done, and you don't fix the damp problems and stuff. I'm not talking about damp problems caused by tenants. That's a different problem, I know. But the genuine damp problems that aren't the tenants. Like if you're that kind of landlord, you are a major problem in society. You are a parasite, and you are the reason that good landlords are being pushed out of the industry. So either be a good landlord or get out, basically. Sorry. And by the way, in the middle of the good and the bad landlords, you have the clueless landlords who, if you're a tenant, a clueless landlord is just as bad as a bad landlord. Don't be a clueless landlord. If you are a landlord and you think you might be a bit clueless, go and check out theindependentlandlord.com. Suzanne Smith, please go and check out her website. Huge amounts of free stuff to turn you from a clueless bad landlord into a good, socially beneficial landlord. Be a good landlord. And congratulations to those of you who are, and the ones who are doing okay but not great, okay but could do better. The bad ones, please just do one. Go on, sell up. Sell your house to the landlord, to the tenant, I mean. Right, that's a bit of a rant, wasn't it? Okie dokie. Be under no illusion, everybody who suffers at the hands of high house prices, that lending is the root cause of high house prices. Expanding lending, extending lending salary multiples, God, I had an amazing message from someone. I think I posted it on X. She was, that's right. She was talking to different lenders, and she said, "Look, this person set her own budget at £900 a month for a mortgage payment, and was told how much she could borrow with it." And another lender came along and went, "Yeah, but we'll lend you double that. We'll lend you two and a half times that, and your mortgage payment will be £2,200 a month." And she sent me this, going, "What are they thinking? I can't afford to. They're actually offering me that mortgage." And so the difference between a buyer saying I can afford £900 comfortably and that gets me a budget and I can go out and buy a house with that, great. And these lenders going, "Hey, never mind that, we can lend you twice as much." And of course, some borrowers who don't do their numbers and don't understand the maths will go, "Yay, let's overextend ourselves, push house prices up, and then end up losing a house that we can't afford down the line." So extending lending terms, extending lending multiples, and easing lending criteria, which is what this story is about here from Richard, are the things that are causing first-time buyer prices to go up where they are going up faster than anything else. Let's just read this, okay? And there is a link to this LinkedIn post in the link below. So there's a 5 Fact Friday links blog. Click on that and you'll find all of these. So Richard Donald, who is the Director of Research at Zoopla, and he was on as a guest a couple of weeks ago. Right, so like all buyers using a mortgage, first-time buyers got a 20% boost to buying power earlier in the year when lenders reduced stress tests. All right, so that effectively removed the caps on how much they could lend you. This has boosted first-time buyer numbers. Well, and also had a pricing impact. We have analysed the average price of homes first-time buyer looking to buy on Zoopla, and it shows that in the northern regions, first-time buyers are looking to buy homes 6 to 10% higher in price than a year ago, well ahead of the UK average for all homes of 1.4%. Now, he makes an observation here about how affordability constraints are a drag on prices in southern England. The ending of stamp duty relief in April has had a buying costs for first-time buyers in the south of England, which explains why first-time buyers are looking to buy homes 2.4% lower than a year ago, right? Despite the easing of lending criteria. So that's just talking about how different the market is in terms of affordability between the north and the south. But look, you know how I always go on, and by the way, yes, Halifax did put the house price index out this week. It's of absolutely no consequence when I'm moving house, which is why I haven't included it in this week's 5 Fact Friday. Listen to this. With more than 50% of new lending for home purchases by first-time buyers, this stronger profile of house price inflation may be one reason that the lender house price indices are running stronger than others, like the Zoopla house price index. In other words, he's explaining why Nationwide and Halifax announce house price increases higher than are actually happening, proving my point for dummies like Russell Quirk who don't seem to understand maths, that you cannot rely on lender house price indices and they should just be ignored. Okay, so just to wrap up that point for people who have only just joined, this is a story by Richard Donald, who's the head of data at Zoopla, proving with research that when you ease lending criteria, the cheapest houses are the ones that go up in price the fastest. In other words, the only ones that were affordable suddenly stop being affordable. We should all rail against expanding lending multiples because it's the number one cause of bad affordability. Right. God. Too much ranting for Friday morning. Okay, RACS. The Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors has published its September survey. Now, the important thing to remember about this is not a house price index. It's a survey of their estate agency members around the country. It's around about 200 or so, and they ask them the same set of questions every time. This document is linked to below. Exactly what questions they ask the agents are published in this document. And what's interesting about this monthly survey, it's effectively a sentiment survey, okay? But it's kind of the only one that gives us a finger on the pulse of what agents are seeing and feeling out on the front lines. It does have a 30-day delay, okay? Because from the date they publish it, it's about 4 weeks. So right now, they're already filling out the new survey that's being published next month. So it's got about a 1 month delay. And last month, it talked about activity falling quite fast. This month, it's saying that's continuing. Let's just read the headlines here. New buyer inquiries and agreed sales metrics both remain in negative territory. I mean, they're contracting. House prices still seen creeping lower at the aggregate level. They don't measure actual prices. That's literally asking the agents, are prices where you are going up or going down? And what they're saying here is that more agents are saying they're going down than going up. And credit to them for saying at the aggregate level, right? Because that means when you put them all together around the country, it's overall negative, but locally it's not the case. Forward-looking, and this is the message to sellers, forward-looking sentiment suggests the market backdrop is unlikely to change materially over the coming months. It's not getting any better anytime soon. So if you are a seller thinking, oh, we'll wait till next year in the hope that it's going to get better, it isn't. It's going to get worse. I have been saying this to sellers since 2022, and there has been an increasing line since 2022 of more and more and more and more property coming to the market and not selling, meaning that it has got more into a buyer's market and harder to sell, and it continues to do so. And some of you still don't believe me, and you're still not listening, and you're going to rue the day that you ignored it. So that's the RICS. And again, they do have a lot of useful regional stuff. So I recommend, genuinely, if you're moving, I recommend that you go and look at these graphs to look at the regional breakdown of prices in the past 3 months, new buyer inquiries in the past 3 months. Okay, have a look. Have a look at the sales markets charts and lettings markets charts. And then what's really interesting is they also have surveyor comments. So from around the country, they have individual named agents giving commentary on what's happening in their part of the world. All right. So genuinely, I think, genuinely useful background. It will not tell you what your house is worth. Nothing will tell you what your house is worth except for getting multiple offers on your house. That's the only thing. All righty. Okay, on to the biggest piece of news this week. I have to say, I repeatedly am shocked by the point of view of a lot of people about the housing market, about house prices, about stamp duty, about tax, and how it all works. And I get it. It's really complicated. The number of different influences and factors on the housing market are very complicated, to the point where actually even most people who work in the industry cannot get their head around how many different factors there are. For example, lending multiples, for example, different taxes, different levels of stamp duty, economic wages, interest rates, all of these things affect it, right? And for most people, if you were to say, what causes house prices to go up or down? They'll go, oh, supply and demand. Wrong. Absolutely, provably false. Right? Okay. In the rental market, yes. it is supply and demand in the rental market much more directly. But in the housing market, for house price sales, no, it's much more complicated than that. And that's why it's so heavily manipulated by the press, by lenders and everything else, because they have a vested interest in keeping house prices high, okay? It is not about supply and demand. If it was, prices would be coming down because there's no housing shortage nationally. There are something like 2 million empty or available properties for sale. No one ever talks about it because the lenders and the government and the media would never want to admit that actually there isn't a housing shortage. There are some highly acute shortages in localized areas that get a lot of attention and make it feel like house building is the solution. Now, why do you think they want to say house building is the solution? Why? Have a think about it. Then ask yourself why there are so many unsold new builds. Is there really a housing shortage? No, there's a money shortage. Okay, so that's one thing. People think house prices, supply and demand. Wrong. People think interest rates. Oh, if interest rates come down, house prices go up. No. The cost of borrowing money changes slightly, but that impacts house prices much less than lending multiples. So people think, oh yeah, interest rates are going to come down. Woohoo! Yes, of course, there is an effect, but it is only one in a long list of things that affect things, which is why, for example, as Zoopla points out, you've got first-time buyer house prices in the north rising at between 6 and 10% in some areas, but first-time buyer house prices in the south falling at 2 to 3% in some areas, okay? Because there are many other factors. I could go on, right? The list goes on, but stamp duty, the way to think about stamp duty is literally like a handbrake on the number of people moving house. People think, oh, but if you take stamp duty away, house prices go up. No. That only happens if it's a temporary stamp duty holiday because people rush to beat the deadline. Now, the reason they do it, okay, and sometimes bizarrely, this is the point at which it goes wrong. People will go and offer more money. And like, let's say that the stamp duty holiday is going to save them 10 grand. They'll bid 15 grand extra rather than pay to get a house, rather than pay 10 grand of stamp duty. Now, there is some logic in that because 15 grand going into an asset that is supposed to be a stable asset is a better use of that 15 grand than 10 grand being spaffed like a fart in the wind to the government with nothing to show for it left over, okay? And yet there are people who think, oh, no. I've seen these comments and it blows my mind. Oh, no, we'd rather pay stamp duty than a higher house price. Now, first of all, that phenomenon where people bid more for a house because there's no stamp duty only exists because there's a deadline. And if there wasn't a deadline, you wouldn't see the rush and therefore you wouldn't see the price increase. That's the first thing. And the second thing, by the way, there's no chance of this happening, of course, because literally there's no chance of the Tories getting into power. There is a chance of the Tories being in power as a coalition. Okay. So, but yeah, I think the most interesting thing here is whether or not the reaction to this policy announced by the Tories affects Rachel Reeves' decision in the budget. That's what I think is interesting. But stamp duty is like a handbrake on people's decision to move or ability to move. Okay? The number of first-time buyers in the South now paying stamp duty compared to before April this year when they before they lowered the threshold has doubled. And that's reducing the number of people who can buy. And the first-time buyer market and the flat market in the South is really struggling in terms of volumes. Transaction volumes are coming down. And transaction volumes, there are a few things that feed the UK local economy, right? GDP includes things like oil and gas production and hospitals and banking and all that kind of stuff, which doesn't really help us at a street level. When people move house, the 20,000 quid odd that it generates in one-off spend as a result of that move between the buyer and the seller put together is almost all spent at a local level in the local economy, creating jobs and creating business for local businesses. That is why it is such a powerful thing if transaction volumes increase. And everyone needs to understand that in 2006, there were, I think, 1.7 million housing transactions. Now, that was 19 years ago, right? But it shows you what the transaction volume potential is when there is nice, easy freedom to buy and sell houses. Since then, the population has gone up 20%. And yet, housing transactions has fallen by over a third, by about 40%, right? And we're down about the 1.1 million transaction levels a year. And you get the planks like Russell Quirk going, oh, there's nothing wrong with transactions, because he doesn't understand maths. When actually the pent-up demand, as proved by the survey I'm about to show you, proves that if the obstacles to moving were removed, the number of people moving would jump. And when that happens, it does so many things. Increasing transactions increases spend in the economy, and it increases the government's tax take in many other ways. But it also unlocks money that is locked up in larger houses that people won't downsize from because of stamp duty. So it cannot be overstated the beneficial effect to the economy and to the government in forms of VAT, corporation tax, PAYE, all which would go up on the back of increased transactions. Job creation, massive job creation that would bring down the universal credit bill, benefiting the government and offsetting the loss of stamp duty revenue, but also improving social mobility. Okay, the benefits are massive. And it just astonishes me that people are so worried about tax. Oh no, oh God, we can't possibly have the government losing any tax revenue. This genuinely seems to be people's concern. Oh no, but what if they lose tax revenue? You've got to understand, right, that the assumption, the flawed, baseless, incorrect assumption that people say, but hang on a second, if they scrap stamp duty, they'll have to find the money elsewhere. The flawed assumption behind that thought or point of view is that scrapping stamp duty doesn't have an effect on transactions. It does. How much? Nobody can tell, nobody can prove. But that's where it brings me on to this final point, okay? So Jackson Stops did a survey and found out that 500,000 downsizers would sell up in the first year if stamp duty was abolished. That is massive. That, if it's correct, implies a huge burst of activity in the housing market if they were to abolish stamp duty. Okay, and the downsizers are people selling from typically above the £500,000 level, and so this government's plans to perhaps reduce stamp duty below 500,000 isn't going to unlock that, right? That number there, it's not going to unlock it. That would be massive in terms of activity, so much. I don't think they'll do it because it's going to push house prices down as well, right? So people think, oh, stamp duty, if you cut that, then it just puts that onto the price. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Because again, that assumption assumes that people automatically bid 100% of all available funds, which isn't true, is it? I mean, the flaws in these assumptions are massive. So this is 2.8 million in total downsizing over 5 years. This is one of the most competitive, never mind first-time buyers and all that benefit at the bottom of the market. It unlocks large empty houses that aren't currently coming to the market that would free up and make family homes more affordable, and that affordability improvement would trickle down throughout the whole market. So this is a 2025 downsizer survey based on homeowners aged more than 55 in England. All right, that's just in England. So if you add in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, it would be an even bigger number. Right. Yes, to those of you who have been paying attention, thank you. By the way, I know that last time I did a 5 Fact Friday from here, the internet, the picture was terrible. Is it better today? I've got no way of knowing. Is it better today? I hope it is. Have you got a clear picture of me? Can you see and hear me okay? um, WF451 says, Lambo landlord here. Going to leverage up a bit more and buy a Ferrari later this afternoon. Nothing like a life of parasiting, a maggot of rentier capitalism. Happy days. Yeah, those are the landlords we don't need. Those are the landlords we don't need. Quite right. Robert Smith says, what about all the tenants who destroy properties, refuse to pay the rent or move out? Yeah, exactly. This is a very, very good point. Now, of course, no one has any sympathy for landlords because people think that landlords are rich, which of course is not the case. A lot of landlords who've been landlords for a long time on interest-only mortgages are finding out just how unwise their decision was to only get interest-only mortgages. But then you got the likes of that absolute nutcase Abby, what's her name? Yeah, just borrow, but leverage, buy it. And yet tenants do destroy properties and they do refuse to pay the rent and they exploit the law that's on their side and then they refuse to move out. Yep, that happens a lot. Those risks are why I say it's now too risky to be a landlord with only 1 or 2 properties. Because if you end up with one of those tenants, it's an absolute nightmare, not just financially, but stress, everything else. The English Voice says, reducing stress tests, it's almost like nothing has been learnt from the subprime fallout in 2007, 2008. Yep, exactly. Wait, Ramble and Root, are you saying Ricks should be saying that rather than no better for month? Sorry, I can't. That's a confusing comment. I don't quite understand what you mean there. Tufel, good morning. Scarlett, hi there. Lisa Red from Web, good morning. Do I have space to buy multiple lands first? I don't know. Just looking for questions here. Grainy. Oh dear. Sorry. A bit blurred. Morning, Richard. Richard Green on LinkedIn. How you doing? Oh, my foreground plants in the focus. Is that stealing focus? Yes. Right. Guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I've been blathering on for 42 minutes. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. There was a glitch in this morning's newsletter with my thought of the week. So to those of you who get the newsletter with my unique thought of the week that I don't put anywhere else, apologies about that. I can't undo that now. To those of you who don't get my newsletter, you can join the mailing list for it here, mhwc.co.uk/newsletter, where I send out these 5 facts every week with a few other bits and bobs in there as well, and my thought of the week that's only in the newsletter. Yeah, sorry about that this week, guys. A little bit of a glitch, all to do with how disorganized I am. Thank you all very much for watching. Please spread the word about stamp duty. Please tell, if you hear people saying, oh, well, they can't cut stamp duty, where would they get the tax from? Send them to this video, or the one I did earlier in the week about it. Anyone going, oh, it'll make house prices go up, the stamp duty. No, it won't. That only happens when it's a holiday. There are so many falsehoods about this. Yes, it does give strapped first-time buyers a slightly bigger boost to their deposit. But that doesn't increase what the lending availability is to them. No, the government does that on their own anyway. Guys, have a great one. If you are new here, and there's just like hundreds of new people every week, so it's wonderful. Thank you very much, and welcome to all the new people. If you are a new mover here and you'd like to get a snapshot, the most concise snapshot of all the advice I offer to movers, buyers, and sellers, then just go and search for chart. I think you'll find it in the description below anyway. There's a long list of links. Charlie's 10 golden rules for home sellers, Charlie's 10 golden rules for home buyers. Start there, and then go through the other. I think there are over 1,000 videos on this channel now. Unbelievable. Have a fantastic weekend, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye. Remember, if you're selling, don't overprice. If you're buying, don't overpay.